All attention today is focused on Pokrovsk, the Pokrovsk direction, the settlement itself, and the city of Pokrovsk. And with the information you can share with us today, because of course it may be changing, it's dynamic. We are constantly analyzing in which direction things are going, together with our guests, based on the information we receive both from the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Mr. Syrskyi, and from the General Staff. But we would also like to hear from you as an active serviceman. What is the situation at this moment?
Speaking generally about the Donetsk region and the area of hostilities near the settlement of Pokrovsk, in the settlement of Pokrovsk, it should be noted that the enemy is transferring more and more forces and resources to continue their assault operations. The enemy has been tasked in the short term, in the near future, to capture the city of Pokrovsk. To achieve this goal, they spare neither effort nor resources. The defense forces are eliminating a very large number of enemy personnel every day, specifically in this direction. As a result, the enemy is unable to accomplish the objectives set for them by the leadership of the Russian armed forces. That is why the enemy is employing various tactics. Speaking about the city itself, their sabotage and reconnaissance group is actively trying to operate, including using the same tactics as in Kupiansk, that is, disguising themselves as civilians. Unfortunately, a certain number of Ukrainians, civilians, remain in the city of Pokrovsk. At the same time, the enemy is actively trying to bypass the city on the flanks. Right now, without any exaggeration, one of the main battles of the Russian-Ukrainian war is taking place. And I believe that we will still be able to inflict serious losses on the enemy and prevent them from achieving, within the time frame they have set for themselves, the objectives assigned by their higher command, namely the occupation of the city of Pokrovsk.
Yuri, tell me, if we are now talking about the development of the situation around Kupiansk, I keep recalling one of the statements made by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, regarding the fact that there too an operation is currently underway which is supposed to clear this settlement of Russian occupiers. What does your analysis show? What do your observations tell you?
As you know, our unit is operating in the Pokrovsk direction. Our unit is actively destroying the enemy just as it is in the Kupiansk direction. And I have to tell you that there is positive news that has been announced by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine regarding the fact that in the northern part of the city of Kupiansk, where the enemy had the opportunity to actively cross from the left to the right bank, due to the intensity and the number of losses they could afford, which was high. And as a result, it was very important to cut the enemy off, not to give them the opportunity to entrench themselves in the city itself, including with their sabotage and reconnaissance groups. As a result, these tasks were partially accomplished by the defense forces. The enemy now does not have the ability to replenish the number of personnel they had in Kupiansk, who were carrying out a certain range of tasks. Let's say they were preparing the ground to expand the possibilities for the Russian occupation forces to enter along the main arteries and to fully occupy the city. That is why I have great hope that the city of Kupiansk will remain under the blue and yellow flag for a long time to come. And may it stay that way, God willing, until the moment we defeat the Russian Federation in this war. The fighting is difficult and intense because the enemy has concentrated a large number of unmanned systems, is actively using aircraft with guided bombs, and is also employing artillery, including rocket artillery. There are certain rocket launches from North Korea which have distinctive features that make it possible to identify them as being from North Korea. There are launchers with technical specifications that were once in service in China and perhaps even earlier and are still in their arsenal to this day. They were the ones who manufactured them, and how they ended up on the front lines, whether through North Korea or another country, is also It's an interesting question because we understand that the Russian Federation, unfortunately, supports other countries in their ability to conduct hostilities against Ukraine. But at the same time, we are seeing success in Kupiansk. And if you compare the situation from 2 weeks ago to now, it is completely the opposite. The defense forces have already accomplished the impossible as of today and continue to carry out these tasks every day.
Yes, also, Yuri, Sasha, if I may, let's recall the Zaporizhzhia direction, because according to the military personnel, in particular, the deputy commander of Typhoon, Mr. Fosdenko, Pavlo Fosdenko, also mentioned this, that in the Zaporizhzhia direction, there is quite a large concentration of Russian troops today. But what interests me is the Zaporizhzhia direction. Is the key objective for the Russians there the city of Zaporizhzhia itself?
Look, it's very difficult for me to speak about Zaporizhzhia. We are not carrying out missions there. If we also have to carry out missions in Zaporizhzhia, I'm afraid it would be very difficult for the unit. And if we're talking about objectives and tasks, I would broaden the scope a bit. We're now discussing Kharkiv region, we're discussing Donetsk region, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson. And we're talking about the fact that the enemy is attacking us from the air with missiles and strike drones. We should be talking about something else, not to analyze the front line of contact as much as possible. Of course, we need to know what's happening at the front, but we need to answer a key question for ourselves. What are the real goals of the Russian Federation regarding Ukraine? The real goal is the destruction of the Ukrainian state and the destruction of what makes this state from within, that is Ukrainians themselves. And as a result, the Russian Federation, as long as they have the money and the means, will continue to pursue these objectives. Whether in Zaporizhzhia region or in Kharkiv, Donetsk, or Sumy, Chernihiv region still remains in question because, as you know, the front line, the villages and towns on the border with the Russian Federation are constantly suffering from both airstrikes with bombs and attacks by unmanned systems. That is why Russia is trying to destroy us. Here, when discussing the line of combat contact, we must say the following. Friends, let us unite even more strongly than we did at the very beginning of the war in 2022. Let us support our defense forces. Let us draw our partners' attention to the crimes the enemy is committing by destroying Ukrainian civilians. And let us do everything possible so that at this historic moment we turn the tide and make Russia get what it deserves and crawl back with its rotten teeth broken. And then we must ensure that our state is wealthy and secure with a strong army where every citizen of Ukraine will be prepared for the potential outbreak of hostilities. And then we will be able to confidently say that we have succeeded in establishing Ukrainian statehood, that we will succeed in returning our territories, and that we can ensure our children and grandchildren will not have to fight. But it would be even better if we could do this, if we could engage in conflict without having to reach out to Western countries and our partners in the North Atlantic Alliance.
Absolutely, on this point, we can only support you. You know, continuing the conversation about how we should prepare, about what we need to do right now. I would like to ask you about this, to have you comment on it. Just today, the President of Ukraine held a briefing and representatives of the Ukrainian Cabinet of Ministers also took part. And during this briefing, the President announced that Ukraine is launching a program to protect frontline cities, such as, for example, Kherson. But of course, we're talking about, let's say, a larger number of Ukrainian settlements that in one way or another border directly on the line of contact. And the President noted that the command of the Unmanned Systems Forces is already ready for implementation, has received certain support at the state level, as the President mentioned. The program provides for a set of measures to detect, intercept and neutralize hostile drones that may threaten a particular city. Yes, we understand that it must be implemented. Perhaps you know more about this, Yuriy, how exactly this program is supposed to work. But overall, what should be emphasized here, Yuriy? As we understand it, given the statements about expanding the program for producing these interceptor drones, they will also be an essential component of this approach.
The forces of unmanned systems, if we count how many percent of the total troops, it will be only 2.
2%.
Count what? 2% of all troops. If we count the number of enemies and targets we destroy, it's 30 to 35. From the targets we hit on the battlefield and destroy the Russian Federation in the attack. So are her troops, her equipment. Now, as you've heard, the forces of unmanned systems are growing in size. Plus, there are 15,000 unique positions for which we are inviting Ukrainians who are subject to military service, who can serve in the armed forces, in the forces of unmanned systems. These are those who are not subject to military service. This is also very important. For example, we have many service members, women, girls, serving, and they very effectively carry out combat missions with various types of unmanned systems, both as operators, as navigators, and as loaders. In other words, all the same professions that men perform at the front. Therefore, within the framework of this program, what we can say is that we are scaling up the crews who must protect our Ukrainian sky. And our partners, as part of this initiative, should help us finance those means, those unmanned systems that you see on your screens. among others, which will help us make the Ukrainian sky as safe as possible. Everything that appears there, both on the front line of combat and deep within our operational space. To shoot down both Supercams, Orlans, Zalas, as well as Shaheds, and those that make Gerans, which are cheaper but can carry a warhead and can also serve as relays or reconnaissance drones. That's why we can definitely achieve the result that will make our skies safer. But for that, we need the main capital of war. If our partners are ready to provide funding, Ukrainian companies are ready to produce quality drones, and we need those who will pilot these drones. And these are real people. That's us together with you.
Yuri, we also want to ask you, because right now